This is the Talkin Bout the Hoosiers podcast, presented by HoosierIllustrated.com.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to episode 8 of the Talking About the Hoosiers podcast, presented by HoosierIllustrated.com. I'm joined by my two co-hosts, Alec Lastly and Kyler Snaley, and I'm Drew Rosenberg. Guys, it's here. Basketball season, Sunday, scrimmage, finally here.
It's about time, right? It's about time. I think we're all tired of talking about Indiana football, right?
It's definitely going to be something new. That's for sure. I know there's obviously a lot of excitement around this year. So it should be fun for everyone to get back into Assembly Hall and get back to watching Mike Woodson in Indiana basketball. So it's been a long wait. So I think everyone's pretty excited.
I will say it felt good to be back in Assembly Hall on Friday. I don't know about you, Drew, but it feels different. It's just such a different vibe, being back in Assembly Hall versus, being at Memorial Stadium, especially this year, with just how IU football's kind of, going about things right now. But it just feels good to be at least back in Assembly Hall and everything. So basketball is on the way.
Yeah, I mean, like Memorial Stadium, I can't talk right now, but there's just not like the history. I mean, with the Assembly, it's like the aura of it is what it just makes it so special. And anytime going to a game there or even Hoosier Hysteria, it's just so exciting. And it's always great to see Woodson's goatee. So I guess, the first thing really to start from is some recruiting news. Boogie Fland committed to Kentucky over Indiana last Friday. Kind of not really surprised, I would say, just kind of over the last 3 or 4 days before the recruitment seemed like a lot switch. Kyler, what were you kind of hearing about that?
Yeah, so and Alec, feel free to jump in on this, whatever. But yeah, it just seems like kind of the winds kind of shifted, right? Kentucky made a last push. It seems like, Indiana recruited them pretty hard until about the very end with that, and until as much as they could at least. But yeah, I think it just came down to, he made a decision. He felt Kentucky was the better option. And honestly, if you really look at Kentucky's track record with the guards and the point guards that they've had over the years and John Calipari's brought in, it makes sense, to an extent. Mike Woodson right now has only got really one guard that he can really kind of prove is like, hey, this is what I did, which is Jalen Hood-Schifino. But I think it's just, it's a move that Boogie felt was best for him and everything. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really right now. I don't think it really bothers Indiana next year. They should have a solid core coming back. And, in that core, you're hoping that Gabe Cupps is ready to take that lead, hoping CJ Gunn's ready. And then also you've got the potential chance of Trey Galloway coming back. And then you can also throw Liam McNeely in there as well. We've seen him over the past, last few AAU seasons play kind of a 2-guard role or a point guard or something like that. But I don't think it's time to panic, if you're an Indiana fan or anything. It is what it is. You just kind of got to move on and, recruit the next guy. Look at the transfer portal, look at maybe some late guys, in the spring or whatever. Mike Woodson's really good about, snagging that late addition, a decommit or something like that. You just kind of got to wait and see what happens. But I don't think it's anything to stress about right now.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that Kyler hit on is definitely the track record that Kentucky has. You pretty much look around the NBA and it's very, very guard heavy with what they've been able to produce, right? De'Aaron Fox, Tyrese Maxey, Emmanuel Quickly, who I believe was actually at Boogie Fland's announcement there in New York. Tyler Hero, right? Devin Booker. It just goes on and on, the list of really, really talented guards that have come through Kentucky. And they've always ended up in phenomenal situations when you look at the next level. And that's what Boogie Fland wanted. He wanted to play with an NBA-style system, which, both have at this point. I think it was a little bit still up in the air what Indiana is actually going to look like without Trace Jackson Davis. So you still have those some of those questions potentially in the back of their mind. But no, this was a hard-fought battle to the very end. And when you're going up against, every single program in the country for top 10, top 15 players, you're going to get a lot of no's. You're obviously going to get some yeses with Liam McNeely, right? Who they just got a couple weeks ago as well. So nothing to be concerned over. I think a lot of people we're expecting a potential Boogie Flan commitment up until probably the last, maybe 72 hours, kind of outside of the program, that is. And that's just not where things ended. But at the end of the day, right, you're still heavily involved with Derek Queen, coming down to the wire with him, another 5-star, really, really talented player in the 2024 class. And you've pretty much set yourself up for what should be a very strong 2025 recruiting class, with not only the amount of in-state kids that are both, mutually high on Indiana as Indiana is on them, and then still around the country with a lot of talented players that Indiana is going to remain involved with moving forward. But at the end of the day, shouldn't be too worried about where Indiana stands on a national level. They're going to end up still landing a lot of really talented high-end 4-stars and definitely high-end 5-stars in the next 2 classes here.
I mean, yeah, that's the thing. Woodson talked about wanting to recruit the best and get the best players. You're going to lose a lot of the battles, as you mentioned, but being in the conversation in the top 2 for guys like Liam McNeely, Boogie Fland, and Derek Queen coming up, it shows how far this program's come, because prior to Woodson, Indiana wasn't in those conversations. They weren't in those recruiting battles. And yeah, you're going to lose a lot more than you win, but you're in the battles, and that's huge for a program like Indiana trying to get back to, where it's been in the past. And then speaking of recruiting battles, I mean, there's another one coming down. It was leaked that Derek Queen would be committing Friday, but he said that's just not the case. 5-star, Liam McNeely's teammate, Montverde Academy guy. So how are you guys feeling about his recruitment? Alec, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so obviously there was a lot of talk about a potential Friday announcement from Derek Queen, report that was out there. Obviously, Derek Queen had to come out and say that would not be happening. Everything that we've heard up to this point has been a decision before the early signing period, which begins November 8th. So regardless of if it was going to be Friday or early signing period, right, you were going to find out where he was going to go within the next kind of week and a half to 2 weeks. Everything still kind of points to potentially a decision next week. But again, even if it's not, you're not going to have to go much farther than kind of 2 weeks before you really get to where he makes that ultimate choice. But it sounds like it's going to be either Maryland or Indiana at this point. Houston has been heavily involved for the majority of this recruitment as well, but seems like Indiana and Maryland are the 2 that have definitely separated in that battle. Maryland, the hometown school per se for Derek Queen, originally from the Baltimore area. So they have that pull in that kind of recruiting pitch of wanting to keep all those DMV kids in the area ever since Kevin Willard took over there, a little over a year ago now. Obviously ended up landing Jamie Kaiser and Deshaun Harris-Smith, 2 guys that Indiana were heavily involved with for a certain amount of time. And so you look at another major recruiting battle between the 2 programs, and it's going to go down to the wire. It does not seem like a decision has been made. And talking with a couple of people around that recruitment, it does not seem like his Maryland visit may have gone as great as it could have. His last visit last weekend. You can, kind of point in a couple different directions, right? Indiana has a much better potential path for, what they can do when it comes to development, especially with big guys. Obviously, with Trace Jackson Davis and how Mike Woodson was able to develop him into obviously getting a fully guaranteed roster spot and contract there with the Golden State Warriors this year, and obviously getting drafted, which a lot of people were a little iffy on. And you see obviously what potential that he has with Mackenzie McBacco, what potentially he has with Khalil Ware, obviously Malik Renew. This is a very, as much as it was potentially a guard-dominant offense last year with Jalen Hutchefino really orchestrating a lot of what that offensive system was going to be, it's going to be shifting into a very, very front court kind of heavy offense this year, and with their versatility that they bring to the floor. And that's what Derek Queen has. I mean, when you look at his skill set, not very similar to what Trace Jackson Davis has, but a guy who's not really going to take a lot of threes, a guy who's a phenomenal passer And that's one thing that you really saw from Chase Jackson Davis, and what Mike Woodson's really trying to push from his forwards are playmakers that can not only make plays out of double teams, but potentially run some high elbow stuff out of in the offensive sets there. So similar things that Mike Woodson wants from a talented front court player. Maryland really haven't had that type of development from some of their players, especially not under Kevin Willard up to this point. So the more NBA style, more developmental on Indiana's side, and then more of the stay home, be the hometown hero type pitch, and potentially some NIL obviously involved in both aspects there, and there's been some conversations that maybe Maryland has not lived up to potentially some of the NIL hype that they pump out for some of their recruitments. But all in all, it's going to be a hard fought battle. You definitely have the Liam McNeely pull, but it's going to come down to the wire for both programs here.
I feel like I don't get necessarily the vibe from Queen that he would really care to be a hometown hero. That's just me personally. It seems like he's more locked in of he wants to get developed pretty quickly, and he wants to go to the NBA. And I think the best path to that scenario, and I'm just looking at it, I feel like it is Indiana, just from a developmental standpoint. Kevin Willard, fantastic coach, and he's proven he's going to be a pretty good recruiter. He's going to have Maryland right and everything, but you look at the potential playing time right off the bat for Indiana next year. You're probably not going to have Khalil Ware, potentially may not have Malik Renew. We'll see how big of a jump he makes. And then obviously Anthony Walker's not going to be there as well. So there's going to be opportunities for Queen to come in. I don't really know what Maryland's rotation looks like from a year from now. I just don't, to be honest with you. But yeah, I just feel like the path to go to the NBA is Indiana with him. I think Queen's laser focused on that. Plus, you got the opportunity to play with your best friend, a guy that you trust, and will always get you involved with Liam McNeely. But yeah, it got really weird this week with his recruitment. A lot of reports, like Alec said. A lot of conflicting reports. So we'll just see what it comes down to. But I don't think it's over with, like Alec said as well. I think it's going to come down to the wire in Indiana, Maryland, and who knows what Houston's going to do if they're going to make a late push down the stretch. But it's going to be very interesting to see where he ends up at.
Yeah, that was the thing I was going to ask you guys about, because everything I'm hearing is Indiana, Maryland, but up until recently, it seemed like Houston was very in the race. It seemed like he loved how Kelvin Sampson plays, and now it kind of just seems like they're starting to fade, and it's turning into a two-horse race, it seems, but at the same time, don't really know. It's kind of something interesting to follow, and I guess with Kelvin Sampson, he's a guy I don't think you can ever count out with his track record of recruiting and bringing in transfers and top talent.
Right, and he also just got was it Jarris Walker, the guy that got drafted by the Pacers? I mean, just look at what he did there. He got him into a lottery pick situation, so that is attractive for sure. But I don't know. I just think from a developmental standpoint, I think Woodson's got that out of all three of the coaches. That's going to come down to. I just think he's kind of better suited for that when it comes to development and getting someone ready for the NBA level. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, before Woodson got here, Chase Jackson Davis was a post player. He couldn't really do much other than rim run and play in the post, but turned into a guy who he was catching rebounds and pushing the ball up in transition on his own. He was turned into a really, really good passer, and it's what made him an NBA player. He wasn't an NBA player getting drafted because of his post play. It was because of that development as a passer and ball handler. And guys like Derek Queen, they see that, and that's something that's really attractive to them, and especially when they're trying to get to the NBA.
Yeah, the IQ of Derek Queen is something that impresses me the most. The IQ and the footwork. I mean, if you watch any film or anything on him, the dude just gets it, and he's college ready as well. His conditioning probably needs a little bit more work. The motor probably needs a little bit more work. That's always been kind of my knock on him a little bit, but I think with Woodson, I think he could get that out of him.
Yeah, and definitely the bigger thing was the kind of motor going into this summer, and even kind of at the beginning stages of this summer. But I think you really saw him turn a corner. Definitely, I would say midway through AAU season, the kind of last 3 or 4 months, and really turn into an absolute dominant big guy. I mean, he dominated not only major AAU games, but went in and dominated major high school games as well, kind of fall league games this fall as well. So he's ready to compete right away and ready to kind of take over a starting role wherever he steps into. I think again you're going to go into Indiana with a much more appealing style of play for how he would fit, and I think potentially in the end that could win out, but at this point it's just kind of a wait and see. If this does stretch out a little bit longer and go right to that early signing period, it will be interesting though to see if he does accept any visits from both Indiana and Maryland. Right, that would obviously show a lot about where he's at in that decision-making process. If there's no other visits, that would seem to point to he's pretty much had his mind made up. And we'll kind of see what happens. That happened toward the end of the Boogie Flane recruitment. We'll see if that happens moving forward. But either way, either program is going to get an absolute dominant player, and both programs are going to have to see him at least once when they play each other there in the Big Ten.
I don't think Lane McNeely is going to stop chirping in his ear until the final beat there either.
Yeah, I think moving off the Derek Queen commitment, I think this year is going to be a really big year for Mike Woodson in future recruiting battles, just because these guys, they want to see how he develops. He did it with Trace. He did it with Jalen Hood-Schifino, but now you have Kalel Ware, a guy who has been knocked but has a ton of talent. How does he develop in the system? How does Renew take that next step? How does Mackenzie McBacco? And if Woodson's able to be very successful with these guys and get them to the NBA, which it's called how it is for these guys, it's the goal. They want to be successful at college, but they want to get to the NBA. If you can do that and get all three guys to the NBA, it could do so much for his recruiting profile moving forward. So I guess
I would say if you're able to get back-to-back draft classes with two players drafted, that not a lot of programs do that consistently, right? So if you're able to do that, get potentially 3 first-round draft picks in 2 years, that's enough as a recruiting pitch to just about anyone in the country, and that's obviously where they're trending. Even if they have just one out of Kalel Ware and Mackenzie McBacco, right? Obviously, a lot of time before we get to that point next summer. But just if one of them end up going in the first round, right? That's a heck of a recruiting pitch to just about anyone, especially the 5-star talent that they're consistently going after now.
Yeah, and the transfer portal too. I mean, that'll just open up so much opportunity there.
All right, I guess we should move to Sunday. I mean, it's the first time we're going to see Indiana basketball live in action with this new team, an exhibition against UND. UND last season, I believe, was 26-5 in Division II basketball. Really good team, but again, I want to make one point. It's an exhibition. It's just that. Yeah, you want to take stuff from this game, and there's definitely going to be takeaways. But you got to remember, this team is going to look so different in January, February than they will on Sunday.
Yeah, I think style of play, right, is going to be the biggest thing to try to look at. Again, they're probably going to make a lot more shots on Sunday than what they're going to make consistently throughout the season. That's just always how it goes. But you want to see them kind of develop some sort of rhythm. Develop some, potential as continue that kind of pick and roll action game, but see a little bit where this front court is going to be, and really develop some sort of offensive identity. Probably not going to get that right off the bat. Going to have a little bit of a rusty Xavier Johnson, as I'm sure a lot of people would expect. A lot of new roles and a lot of new faces, a lot of new players who are trying to kind of find their way with this roster. And some freshmen who are obviously trying to step into to significant roles with Mackenzie McBacco, obviously, and then potentially Gabe Cupps trying to come in there and play that backup point guard role that I think is going to be extremely critical for this team this year, with kind of the lack of, I would say, true ball handling depth that Indiana has moving into the season. And then biggest thing for me, right, is kind of what does CJ Gunn look like? What does Caleb Banks look like? And what does Malik Renaud look like? Those are the 3 players that Indiana really needs to kind of step up, all in different ways, right? You're probably not going to get the scoring with Caleb Banks, but it's his versatility. It's his ability to be a really, really good two-way player and someone that I think you can really kind of fit into the mold of a true glue guy moving throughout his career at Indiana. Obviously, with CJ Gunn, you need to shoot the ball better than you did last year, and I think you will. All right, he comes in with the reputation. Kyler probably knows it better than anyone else as being a true knockdown shooter, but even more so a true high volume shooter. That's what Indiana's always lacked, even if they have shot the ball well. At least consistently over the last couple of seasons, is an actual volume shooter, high volume shooter. And then for Malik Reneau, right, just stay on the floor. You're really developing that body this offseason, I think is going to do wonders for him, especially on the defensive side, and not picking up the 6.8 fouls per 40 minutes that he was on track for last year. Not going to be able to stay on the floor like that. And I think those are three guys that I'm probably most excited to see. And then if you're going to go a little bit down the roster there more, I would say Gabe Cupps, like I said, really kind of trying to fit into that mold of that backup point guard to play some really true spot minutes for these guys. And then I think everyone's excited to see Khalil Ware, see what his motor's like, see kind of that versatility that everyone's talked about this offseason, and really see how he kind of takes over. I think more importantly on the defensive side than truly offensively for this roster.
Yeah, Alec touched on a lot of stuff, but I think me personally, I'm more excited to see what the rotation looks like. I've always been a fan, kind of a rotation type of like nerd when it comes to it. I just want to see what Woodson has kind of lined up, especially with the Mbaka situation, where we don't know if he's going to play or not. You don't know if a suspension maybe is part of his punishment. We just don't know yet. So I'm curious to see who would slide in that role, because you would assume Mbaka is probably going to be in the starting lineup throughout the regular season. But I mean, Alec touched on a lot of stuff. I think chemistry is going to be a big thing. I'm a believer that Indiana is probably going to have some chemistry issues, just because it's a lot of moving parts. It's a lot of different pieces and everything. You're going to try to figure it out. I think it's going to take them probably a month or so to really figure out what they can do on the floor together, and, who plays well off of who. And just, going back to the rotations, what are the best rotations? What are the best lineups on the floor at certain times? And you'll start to see that a little bit with the exhibition game, but this really comes down to a couple of things. One, you want your guys to just finally play somebody other than themselves. That they've been going at each other all summer, all spring, all off season. It's just good for them to just kind of figure out, going up against a different team, a different set of guys with that. So it's going to be a lot of rust being knocked off, especially when you look at someone like Xavier Johnson, who this is his first kind of real game since December of last year, going on about a year now. So that's pretty crazy. But, just going down what the starting lineup is, what the rotation is going to look like. And then another cool thing I think it is, you get guys from UIndy, a lot of kids from Indiana. I'm looking at their roster right now. A lot of kids that I've watched over the high school years and stuff. So they get a chance to come in and play at Assembly Hall, which I think is a really cool thing, what Mike Woodson's been doing ever since he's kind of took over, really giving these exhibition, games to a lot of the small schools around here and everything for them to just get that chance as well. But overall, it's just super exciting. Just real anxious to see what these guys bring. Khalil Ware is very exciting. CJ Gunn, Alec mentioned him. I'm really excited to see what he can do. I'm hoping he plays with a lot more confidence this year. A lot more consistency out of him. We'll just see. And then Caleb Banks is going to be super electric, hopefully. And then Malik Reneau, we'll see. I've always been a big Malik Reneau fan. With that, I think if he takes the big step this year, I think he's going to really help Indiana have a lot of success as well. So just fun times. It's exciting to see this Indiana team back on the floor again.
Yeah, I think the thing I'm most interested to see is the floor spacing. I mean, with Trey Jackson Davis, you had a guy who really couldn't step out and knock down jump shots, which he was so talented, it really didn't hurt him, but it hurt the spacing. But now you have Khalil Ware, a guy who can shoot the ball from three. Reneau, we've seen, hasn't really shown he can shoot the ball. I know he won the 3-point contest 2 years ago. Hoosier Hysteria, but
he actually, watching the Montverde games, he would step out and shoot the three. So it's there. It's there. It just needs a little bit more showing.
But if you have a lineup where Xavier Johnson's best ability is his ability to get downhill and get to the rim, and now you don't really have someone who's clogging the paint, and there should be more room for driving lanes for him to drive and kick the shooters like Mackenzie McBacco. And I expect Trey Galloway, I think his percentage will drop. I mean, he shot, I think, 46% from three last year. And if he takes the amount of attempts I expect, that's just he's not gonna shoot that high of a percentage just because he's going to be taking a lot more threes. But if he can just keep his percentage around 37, 38 on a decent number of attempts, he's going to be a real weapon for the Indiana offense. And just the spacing that will open up posting for Malik Renew, driving for X and McBacco in the pick and roll with Renew and Kalel Ware with Xavier Johnson. So I think the spacing is going to be something that I'm probably going to be the most focused on heading into Sunday. But then also, I mean, does Mackenzie play? And if he does play, how does he look? Because I keep hearing mixed things. One source says he looks great in practice. The other says he hasn't been like that great of a player. So kind of there's a lot to be excited about. But again, it's just an exhibition.
Right.
Yeah,
You're not going to take a whole lot from it. Just it's going to be a beatdown. That's just how it's going to be. But you won't take a lot out of it by the end of the day.
Yeah, I think in terms of rotations, right, you're going to see a lot of different groups out there, and you need to. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how the front court rotation is mixed together. You have a lot of different versatility with Anthony Walker, Peyton Sparks, right, coming off the bench. Who do they play alongside? What's kind of the most effective use as a backup five? I wouldn't really put Anthony Walker's probably the closest thing to that backup five. But obviously you lose some of that versatility there, stretching the floor in terms of the offensive side of things. But I think all four of those guys are going to be extremely versatile on the defensive end, which hopefully, again, if Malik Renew kind of takes that step defensively, would be extremely effective at and helping Indiana with not a true proven shot blocker in Indiana's defense, right? Because Kalel Ware has obviously done that, but we don't know what this Indiana defense is going to look like without Trace Jackson Davis, who, again, to this day, I think has masked a lot of holes in the on-ball defense from Indiana's guards. So we'll see what that looks like, but I think that's the one rotation that I'm definitely excited to see.
Yeah, I mean, there's gonna be a lot to talk about. We're gonna talk about more next week, and there's also another exhibition too. So it's what do they build on? And the thing we got to remember, Kyle, you mentioned the chemistry. Indiana has 3 games that I'll say they should win: Florida Gulf Coast, Army, West Point, Wright State, before they get thrown to the fire for the Empire Classic in UConn, and then one of Texas and Louisville. So they're going to have to grow up and build that chemistry really fast if they want to be competitive early in the season, because Mike Woodson has built a gauntlet with his non-conference schedule, and that was something he made a point to do.
Yeah, for sure. They got 3 games, like you mentioned, where they can actually kind of build on it a little bit. I think the chemistry, I don't know. It just, when you have a lot of new pieces like that, and we've seen this over, the past, the past years with Indiana, when they have a big new group come in or whatever, it takes them time to figure it out. The one team I always look back and think of when Tom Crean, lost Zeller, lost Oladipo, Wofford, and those guys, and they brought in Troy Williams, Noah Vonleh, those types of guys. The chemistry, it really took time for it to build and everything. And you had Yogi trying to figure out, how to be a leader and whatnot. I don't think leadership's a question on here. I think Indiana's got a solid group of leaders when you look at Trey Galloway, Xavier Johnson, and even Anthony Leal, who's probably not going to play a whole lot this year, just based on, what we've seen in the past 2 years with him under Mike Woodson. But, it's just all about getting everybody involved. You worry a little bit, Xavier Johnson and Trace Jackson Davis didn't really have this issue where you looked at Xavier Johnson wanted to take over a game or whatever and not realizing, he had the help of Trace Jackson Davis. That was able to get worked out on. You just hope that, X doesn't try to play hero ball too much a little bit, which we've seen in the past that he tries to do a little bit. But I think as long as you get everybody involved in the offense, you really play to everyone's strengths the best that you can. I think Indiana can be really, really dangerous, but I think it's going to take time. I don't think you're going to see a fully smoothed out chemistry with this Indiana team until probably the Big Ten play, I would assume. But it's going to be interesting. And, the exhibition games, the first 2 are a good place to start and everything. for really them to work on themselves and, see what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, and I think, everyone's probably thinking it right, but as much as you want to see everyone play, 30 plus minutes in these exhibition games, just get out of them without any injuries, right? Indiana seems to always have an early season injury to a key piece. Need to be able to get out of this without any injuries and move forward, because again, if you already have a ton of new faces coming in, you need to be able to build that chemistry like Kyler was talking about. You're not going to be able to do that, right, if you have some guy missing 2 or 3 weeks early on in the season, when that's typically where you do try to find some of that chemistry before the gauntlet of kind of mid-November to honestly the rest of the season really hits.
Right, you got to watch a little bit on that Khalil Ware, shoulder injury that he had at the pro day. I mean, he looked fine. Hoosier hysteria, but obviously that's not a game setting. So just something to really kind of monitor there. And Xavier Johnson knocking off that rust and everything. It's been years since he's played. He looked fine. He looked smooth. I looked over at Drew and I said, Hoosier hysteria, man. X doesn't look like he's lost a step yet. I mean, he still looks as fast as ever. But a game setting, game conditioning is a lot different than just kind of dribbling around cones. So we'll see for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I asked them at Institutional Media Day point blank, are you worried about losing that first step? Because, I mean, his first step is one of, if not the best in the Big Ten. And he seemed to have without even hesitation, he was like, yep, nope, I'm not worried. It's there. I'm the same old X. And if that's true, that's going to be a really big guy to have back for this team, especially someone who's been there, been in the tournament, and played in these big games that a lot of these guys haven't. With that, I guess we'll probably be back next week and talk about what we saw from the scrimmage, what we'll look for in next week's scrimmage against Marion, and maybe we'll have some IU football if there's something positive to talk about. But
I don't know. Penn State, I don't know.
Yeah, so yeah, as always, for all things IU, follow Indiana_FRN on Twitter, Facebook, and check out the HoosierIllustrated.com website, and make sure to hit the subscribe button on YouTube and Spotify. As always, thank you for listening to the Talkin Bout the Hoosiers podcast, presented by HoosierIllustrated.com. We'll be back next week.